the casino to carry on business as usual, exposing people in that setting to secondhand smoke. Mr. Speaker, without exception, I think the restaurant and bar owners and lounge owners are feeling, they're feeling very abused, I guess you could say, by this entire process, a process where, first of all, this government did not do the right thing in its own legislation, but created a situation that in fact opened up exactly what we here in the opposition said that would occur, that there would be municipalities all across the province would come in to fill the void that was left by the fact that this government wasn't prepared to do the right thing and to do what the Premier said he was going to do, to introduce legislation and do it right. That piece of legislation has failed so miserably that we now have this patchwork of different rules applying to different kinds of establishments all over the province, different time frames for when bylaws are coming into effect, different levels of government responsible for enforcing bylaws in the same jurisdiction, people out there in the field who are provincial inspectors while you have municipal inspectors responsible for different kinds of bylaws and regulations. It is an absolute mess, a real level of disorganization for those folks, and you can imagine what it's like for operators, for workers in those settings to try to keep track of what government has decided, what regulation that's going to have what impact when. Mr. Speaker, on Friday evening, I was in an establishment that certainly there was a fair amount of smoking going on before 9 o'clock. And I noted that one person not too far away from me approached one of the wait staff around 8:30 to ask for an ashtray and was told, well, I can't give you an ashtray until 9 o'clock, even though there was lots of smoking going on in the establishment, which raises a whole question of how serious this government has been about enforcing their own bylaws or their own legislation. And I certainly hear this from other people. So, Mr. Speaker, we have a situation where the government's own legislation has failed to level the playing field. It's failed to create a clear set of standards province-wide, and we now have the debacle, really, of seeing municipalities who have rushed in to fill the vacuum left by the failure of this government to provide adequately for the protection for all workers in public spaces. We now see government putting in the Financial Measures Act, Mr. Speaker, a provision to exempt the casino from municipal smoke-free bylaws. Like, how odd is that, Mr. Speaker? Like, can you imagine what exactly does this amendment have to do with the Financial Measures Act and the budget of the province? And I think, Mr. Speaker, this is really shows the level of disorganization, the lack of a clear, committed perspective from that government in terms of what smoke-free legislation should really be about, Mr. Speaker, which is about protecting the health and safety of people in the workplace, and it's also about creating a kind of environment in public that sends a very loud message and signal to our young people and other people that smoking is hazardous to your health, and we as a community will not tolerate having people exposed to secondhand smoke or to be endangering their own health in public places by smoking. So I think that if we hoisted the Financial Measures Act for 6 months, we would have an opportunity to reflect more on the views and the perspectives of bar and restaurant owners, because I think clearly they would have a lot to say about the disorganization and the patchwork that has developed across the province since this government's failed Smoke-Free Places Act.
Order, please. I'm wondering if the member would allow for an introduction. The member for Dartmouth East on an introduction.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank the honourable member from Needham for yielding the floor for a very important introduction. 3 Scouts from, I don't quite have that right. Anyway, they're from the 1st Woodlawn Scout Group. And Gavin Druin, Jack Dawson, and Adam Barnett, accompanied by their leaders, Gail Shea and Lorinda Barnett, and also mother, Virginia Clark Druin. And I'd ask them to rise and receive the warm welcome of the host and welcome the host of the assembly.
There would be a couple of beavers among the group, just to make sure that we get that right. Thank you, honourable member. The member for Halifax Needham has the floor.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, I'm not going to belabor the points that I've made much longer. I think that this is a question of fairness in terms of providing a level playing field to all those hardworking folks who are in the hospitality industry. Casino Nova Scotia should not enjoy special status with respect to provisions that will protect the health and safety of workers. The health and safety of workers needs to be the paramount consideration here, and I think that we also need to be very clear, Mr. Speaker, that the government cannot get away with saying one thing, that they're concerned about wellness and health promotion, while they are essentially selling the souls and the health of some of these workers for a few gold coins, Mr. Speaker. And I think that that's not acceptable. People in Nova Scotia understand that that's not acceptable, and they would like some answers from this government. They would like this government to say what's so special about the casino, and why won't they protect workers who work in that environment just as much as they are looking at workers at Wendy's or any other service sector workers in the hospitality industry. Mr. Speaker, I hope that while we have this motion here on the floor, we'll have an opportunity to hear from members of the government party. I would be very interested in hearing from the member from Sackville-Beaverbank, who during the government's Smoke-Free Places Act certainly demonstrated that he is a independent thinker when it comes to matters of health and issues around smoke-free places. And I know that member also has a lot of respect for the municipal governments, because he came from municipal government, and I think that he is a member who believes in the integrity of the municipal government process, and I would be very interested to know precisely what he thinks about this kind of intervention by his government to take away the decision-making power of HRM Council. I would be quite interested to hear maybe the member from Kings North, who writes such enlightening columns in the Daily News. Perhaps he would give us the benefit of his critical thinking on this particular issue. He seems to have a flair for dealing with ethical issues, and perhaps he could lay out some explanation for the ethics of protecting workers in some parts of the service sector and some parts of the hospitality industry, but not in others. And I'd be particularly interested in hearing from him what he thinks is so special about Casino Nova Scotia that they deserve an exemption from municipal legislation. I think that that's a column that I would very much look forward to. So, Mr. Speaker, with those few remarks, I will take my place. Thank you.
The member for Richmond.
Thank you, Speaker, and I'd like to say that it's a pleasure to rise today to speak on this amendment in regards to Bill 36. But once again, unfortunately, what we have here is a bill which is made up of broken Tory promises, and again, an attempt to try to convince Nova Scotians that they have received good government, when in fact the facts clearly show that they have not received good government. I spoke earlier today, Mr. Speaker, in regard to the Minister of Finance, in regards to what legacy that he will leave. And one, we all know what role the Minister of Finance played in the previous administration, well known to Nova Scotians. An administration which said, don't worry about tomorrow, we're just going to live for today, and someone else will take care of the issues that might be left tomorrow because of our actions. Mr. Speaker, at the end of the day, I have to say, I almost find it amusing when either the Minister of Finance or the Premier or any member of Cabinet gets up and tries to refer to the previous administration, and one looks at the hypocrisy coming from this government when one regards the fact that they have numerous members sitting in their government that were part of the Buchanan administration and what that government did. It was well known and well documented that Mr. Buchanan had a hard time saying no, Mr. Speaker, to different projects and making announcements and having his plaque put up. And how ironic that over 10 years later, after he has left, we have a government that's got the same sort of affliction. A government that first said that they were going to stand under principles. A government which, I must say, Mr. Speaker, took our paramedics to the strike line, saying we will not give in. A government who took our nurses, our valued nurses, and had them striking around here at Province House, made us sit 24 hours a day, and took the nurses all the way, saying we will not give in. And yet, now on the eve of an election, when it comes to other issues which they've said they would stand fast on, watch them cave, Mr. Speaker. Now, what was more amusing than to watch the Premier's about-face on Sunday shopping? When he was first elected, the Premier said the only thing that he bought on Sundays was his newspaper, and he shouldn't have to buy anything else. Then the government came in and said, we're not going to discuss Sunday shopping. And then, lo and behold, the then Minister of Justice and now Minister of Transportation came out and said, we will not discuss Sunday shopping till 2005. Don't ask me about it. Don't talk about it. 2005, I say. Well, now, Mr. Speaker, in a cabinet shuffle, out went the Minister of Justice. My colleague from Cape Breton South has already defined his new portfolio as a junior ministry, a demotion from what he had before, and then the Premier turns around and says, pay no attention to what the then Minister of Justice said. We're now going to talk about Sunday shopping. I've read the polls, and Danny Graham is getting too high in the polls. He has a better pulse of the people. So why, all of a sudden, a fundamental commitment that I made in 1999 is all of a sudden out the window? The then Minister of Justice, the now Minister of Transportation, is left to keep his head down and say, oh, shucks, the Premier once again trumped me, and I guess I got to sit back, and the word I gave about not to talk about it until 2005, I guess that's lost. So, Mr. Speaker, I got to tell you, the 6-month hoist would give us an opportunity maybe for the Premier to explain, because he's flip-flopped so much on Sunday shopping, we're not quite sure where he's at anymore. And I can tell you, Mr. Speaker, out of this, one question has been answered for us. Because I remember at the Tory annual meeting, their president, I think it's Mr. Galbraith, I think is his name, if I'm not mistaken, he indicated at one point to the Tories assembled that he had found a pair of shoes. And he weren't sure whose shoes they were, and he said that they were flip-flops, and he couldn't identify whose shoes they were. Well, as far as Sunday shopping is concerned, we now know where he found those shoes. He found them under the Premier's bed at the hotel. That's whose shoes they were. That's whose shoes they were. They were the Premier's shoes. So Mr. Galbraith should stand up now and say, I now know whose shoes they were. My God, they were our leader's shoes. And look, him on Sunday shopping. He only bought his newspaper, wasn't going to talk about it. We'll only talk about it in 2005. And now all of a sudden, we want to talk about it now on the eve of an election. Well, we know whose shoes those were, Mr. Speaker. And I say, Mr. Speaker, more to come. Because when it comes to debt, all of a sudden the Premier doesn't want to read page 1 of his blue book. He wants to go to page 18 or page 28 or whatever page that Rob Batterson tells him that he should be reading. Because all of a sudden he's forgotten that he said that he'd live within his means and he would mortgage the future of his grandchildren. Well, my. Where did that Premier go? Where did he go? You know, where did he go? Nova Scotians are wondering by the day, as the Premier continues to change his policy on everything, what happened? And what happens, Mr. Speaker, is that the Tory spin doctors have taken over. They are now clearly saying, how many spin doctors have they got? Now clearly saying that here's what he needs to say to get elected. So while Richmond County, Truro area, Glace Bay, North Sydney, and so many other areas are short of medical doctors, this province goes out and hires more spin doctors. Now, again, one has to ask, Mr. Chair, why more spin doctors? If you provided Nova Scotians with good government, like you said you would, well, you've got a track record. Why would you need spin doctors to go out and try to do any spinning for Nova Scotians? Your track record should speak for itself. When you go out and start getting spin doctors, it's a clear admission that you have not provided good government. You have not kept the word that you said you would to Nova Scotians. Therefore, you need to bring in outside sources, use taxpayers' money to pay for people to try to convince Nova Scotians and try to fool them into believing that they've received good government. Now, Mr. Speaker, I can say that I was a member of a government that sat and listened to the then leader of the third party say how a terrible thing it was for the government to be using taxpayers' money to advise Nova Scotians about government decisions. The then leader of the third party said that it's politically motivated advertising using taxpayers' money. And I have no doubt that my good friend from Sackville-Cobequid will remember those days of how he blasted the Liberal government of the day, saying you're using taxpayers' money for politically motivated advertising. Mr. Speaker, let me tell you, this Premier, since elected, has used more taxpayers' money than any previous administration when it has come to politically motivated advertising. I'll give you one example. They started advertising about their tax plan and saying how the tax plan would save Nova Scotians money and reinvest in that. Now, Mr. Speaker, this was before they'd even announced what it would look like. So here they are spending taxpayers' money that, if you read the plan, it refers to the Blue Book on numerous occasions. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't remember the Blue Book ever being known as a government document. It's a Tory propaganda document. Yet, here we are with taxpayers' money paying for a Tory propaganda book with taxpayers' money. Yet the Premier stands in his place and says, no. Bad Liberals, they were doing politically motivated advertising, but no. What we're doing is nowhere as close to that. You know, Speaker, Nova Scotians have had enough of watching this Premier flip-flop from one decision to the next and then try to justify what he is doing. Anyone who thinks that the advertising that we have seen, the blue brochures showing up in your mailbox, the fancy little ads talking about the 10% tax cut, the ads during the nurses' strike, the ads during the paramedics' strike, the ads during when the teachers were prepared to go on strike, you're not going to find one Nova Scotian that doesn't think that that was politically motivated advertising. It was. Yet here was the Premier who said himself, no one else, he is the one who stood up and said, I will not spend taxpayers' money for politically motivated reasons. Yet, Mr. Speaker, he has been tripping over himself to try to get out those ads as much as possible. And again, I say to you, Mr. Speaker, before the election, more to come. More to come on that. They're not done yet. Because you know what's coming next? The Minister of Education is going to stand and finally announce his much-awaited school construction plan. Yet, Mr. Speaker, what this 6-month hoist allows us, it allows us and allows Nova Scotians to ask the Minister of Finance how much money is in this year's budget to pay for the minister's plan on new schools that he's going to announce. And you know what, Speaker? There's none. I shouldn't say that. There's a little bit of planning money. Planning money. How much is there to pay for bricks and mortar and classrooms? There's none. When are these schools going to start being built? 2005.
Just for the next election.
So clearly, Mr. Speaker, this is an opportunity to lift the veil and to show Nova Scotians more and more what kind of government they have. We have seen since January over $700 million of taxpayers' money committed to projects that, again, Mr. Speaker, when you ask how much money is in this budget to pay for the $700 million in commitments, there's not 1 cent. Not one. This is money this government is committing beyond its mandate. And if a new administration is to come in, it is that new administration that will have to answer and have to try to be responsible for the promises made by a government on its way out of office, in a desperate attempt to use Nova Scotians' money to try to curry favor to get back in office. That is exactly what this government is doing. And again, here's the Premier who said in the Blue Book that what a terrible thing it was in the last election that the Liberal government was using $200 million in election promises to try to win the election. He said that was terrible. I will respect voters. I will respect the intelligence of voters, and never will I use taxpayers' money to try to get reelected. $700 million and counting is what we're left with, Mr. Speaker. And again, I stand and I say here to you, Mr. Speaker, more to come. The $700 million figure will soon continue to increase. It has increased now because I would ask, for example, Mr. Speaker, maybe the Minister of Tourism could stand in his place and tell us how much money is in this budget that we voted on today for the new Civic Centre in Port Hawkesbury. The answer is none. How much money for Stora is in this budget? The answer is none. How much money is in how many other projects that they've announced in this budget? The answer is none. That is the reality, Mr. Speaker. Now, it's 2003. We have a very well-educated population in Nova Scotia. Unfortunately, we have a population that has become very cynical of the political process because of the type of actions that we've seen in this government. Because Nova Scotians thought that those days were gone. They figured government won't act like that anymore. John Hamm told us he would not act like that. Yet, what do we see here? A government that is prepared to do anything it can to hold on to office and to hold on to power. That is exactly what we see. Mr. Speaker, I would submit to you that they get more desperate by the day. More desperate by the day, Mr. Speaker. And I would tell you more to come on the promises that they will make on their way out of office, knowing that the electorate is starting to turn on them, that the old adage that a government is usually safe for 2 terms in Nova Scotia is about to change, because Nova Scotians have become fed up with this administration, which even after taxing Nova Scotians to death, putting user fees in an unprecedented fashion, raising $1 billion in additional revenue on the backs of Nova Scotians, and at the end of the day, the Minister of Finance stands here and says, here is a budget, and I need to borrow another $118 million. Speaker, Nova Scotians are saying, just as our leader is saying, that it's time to cut the Tory credit card. It's time to put an end to the borrowing. It's time to put an end to the mismanagement that this government has been providing Nova Scotians after all of the commitments that they have made over the years. For example, Mr. Speaker, when he was in 3rd place, the leader of the third party at the time said $1.5 billion is enough to run the healthcare system. He said, I will go in, I will cut the administrative fat in healthcare because the Liberals have not trimmed it enough. Too much administrative fat. I don't need any more money. No more money required. $1.5 billion is enough. And where are we? The other key thing is in the Blue Book. It says that the Tory government will fix healthcare. The word fix health care. That's what the Premier said. I'm a family doctor. Trust me, I can fix health care. Even better than that, I can do it $1.5 billion by cutting administrative fat. Well, here we are today. A budget is passed today. The Department of Health estimates are nearly $2.1 billion. And when the Minister of Health was asked quite pointedly by me and by others, has your government fixed health care? What was the answer? We have put in more funding to stabilize the system. Now, Mr. Speaker, I would challenge you and others to read throughout the Blue Book and find the word stabilize under health care. The word was fix. The word fix has now been downgraded to stabilize. By who? By the spin doctors who are saying you need to use this language to try to cover up for the fact that you have failed in your commitment to Nova Scotians. You have not been able to fix health care. Excuse me, Mr. Ham, but all of the answers that you had that you were going to fix health care and you knew what was required to fix health care. No, Mr. Ham, after 4 years it is clear that you did not. And after 4 years it is clear that even after all of the transfers and the millions of dollars from Ottawa, you're still incapable of saying that you have fixed health care. So, Speaker, from a local flavour as the MLA for Richmond, as I've said before, the straight Richmond emergency room under this administration, the Tory administration, remained closed longer than it remained opened. That is the legacy that they have left. The Minister, the Premier, when he was the leader of the third party, spoke on behalf of the straight Richmond and implored the government of the day to find solutions. And we did, Mr. Speaker. We did find solutions until this government came into office, and then all of a sudden we were back. We were back to physician shortages. Continual physician shortages is what we have seen from this very government. And again, unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, I must say, more to come. Mr. Speaker, 6 months gives an opportunity for the Minister of Transportation, for example. When he sat as a member of the third party, he was saying there was a need for more nursing home beds, and more nursing home beds, and more nursing home beds. Lift the moratorium, he continually told the then Minister of Health, the member from Dartmouth East. More nursing home beds is what we need. And I challenge him today to stand in his place and tell us exactly how many new nursing home beds has been opened by his government. Again, Mr. Speaker, none. Another broken promise, not only by this government, but by the Minister of Transportation. Again, Mr. Speaker, this was the Minister of Transportation who told us when he was in third party, who said volunteer firefighters should get a $500 tax credit. When the Minister of Minister of Labour at the day said we're going to bring in free license plate renewal because more volunteer firefighters qualify for this than would qualify for the $500 payment. Oh, the Minister of Transportation sat here on this side and said, no, $500. That's what our government will do. $500. Yet today, he stands with his head down because why? He knows that the $500 was not the right way to go. What has the government done? They've offered free license plates to volunteer firefighters, exactly what the government in 1999 said it would do. Another example of a broken promise from this administration. The list goes on. The list goes on, Mr. Speaker. This was a Minister of Justice when he sat here in third party who talked about protecting local courts and protecting local jails. And yet when he got into office, he closed them all. He closed them all. And again, I ask you for example, Mr. Speaker, how much money is in this budget for the new jail in Yarmouth? Is there funding in there in this budget? How much is there? Will it cover the entire cost of that project? Or is that one more of the $700 million of promises that's not included in this budget? You know, how easy it is. How easy it is, Mr. Speaker, to stand there and say, look, I'm going to build this, and I'm going to build this, and I'm going to build that. Yet don't ask me where I'm going to get the money. We'll pay for it tomorrow. Somebody else will be responsible for it. That is the message that we are continually getting from this government. And clearly, Nova Scotians are saying they've had enough. 6 months might give the opportunity for the Minister of Health to go to her constituents in Citadel and say, I'm sorry. I told you in the last election in my nice little postcard Mr. Palmer did for me that if we closed Cisco, we'd open hospital beds. Now, when I asked her how many beds did she open, she refused to answer. The Minister of Justice came to her rescue. The Minister of Education came running, saying, oh my God, he's being nasty to our Minister of Health. Please, Speaker, please protect her. And then at the end of the day, when I asked how many beds did she open, she refused to answer. I believe I asked it 17 times. She refused to answer. And then in the media scrum, she said, no, the member from Richmond's got it all wrong. I didn't say I would open new beds if we closed Cisco. I said I would keep the amount of beds we had in 1999 open. But lo and behold, Mr. LaRoche from CBC Radio, the good researcher he is, said, well, hold on, Minister. I have here from the Department of Health figures which show not only have you not opened any new beds, but 179 beds have closed under your government. So you said you'd keep them open. You have, not only have you not opened any, you haven't kept open what was there in 1999. You've closed beds. And then, lo and behold, they get some hack from Department of Health that comes out and says, oh, well, thinking that just opening hospital beds is a solution to saving health care, that's backward thinking. What she should have done, that communications director, is go tell that to this government that in 1999 said, vote for us, we'll open new hospital beds, and that'll fix health care. So it's too bad that that communications officer was not there to tell the Minister of Health and to tell the previous Minister of Health and tell the Premier back in 1999 when they said, we'll open up new hospital beds and that'll fix the system. Tell the Minister of Transportation today, who wanted to open all sorts of new nursing home beds, yet hasn't opened one in 4 years, that the idea of opening the new beds was not the solution. And now they've got their own communications people saying that that's a backwards way of thinking of fixing health care. Well, too bad that person wasn't there in 1999 when the Blue Book was written, or when the party sat here in third place and was making all these commitments and was attacking the good member from Dartmouth East and saying that by not opening up more beds, that what a terrible minister he was. How ironic. The poetic justice that we see here today when those members and those ministers have to sit with their head down in their place, knowing that what they said as a third place party and what their government has done in 4 years, that they know they haven't been able to keep the commitments that they made in third party back in 1998. 4 years that they have had. Yet, when we ask the Premier, Mr. Chair, about the debt, about his commitments, does he talk about what he has done in 4 years? No. He talks about the government in 1993. He talks about previous administrations. He talks about everybody but him. But then again, Mr. Speaker, I have to qualify that statement by the fact it is very rare that we will get this Premier to answer any questions. What does he refer to? He refers it to his Minister of Finance. Minister of Finance, who has already announced for personal reasons, he will not be offering again. So one would expect, if he's not offering again, that the Premier is going to say, look, I will answer these questions because I am reoffering and I hope to be held responsible for the decisions my government is making. What are we to deduct from the fact that the Premier refuses to answer questions about his government's decisions? Is he ashamed of what his government is doing? Can he not justify on his own the decisions being made? Does he leave it to the Minister of Finance to answer for their decisions, hoping that he will wear any political negativity that will come from that, knowing that he's not reoffering? Has there been a deal arranged saying, look, Minister of Finance, you will take all of the political heat knowing you're not reoffering to try to save the others and spare some of the others? I don't know. If the Premier answered the questions, we wouldn't have to be guessing at whether those are the deals that have been made or not. But that is the reality that we face here today. Mr. Speaker, this is a government with 6 months. The Minister of Education would have an opportunity to return and meet with the Strait Regional School Board and explain to them why his government has not implemented the plan that they said in the Blue Book they would implement. And give them an opportunity to explain when they said in their Blue Book that they would have special funding arranged for boards with high declining enrollments so to avoid the negative impact in the classroom. This is what they said in the Blue Book. Yet now, the member from Guysborough Port Hawkesbury remains silent, the Minister of Tourism remains silent, and the Minister of Education refuses to even discuss the fact 16 teachers again cut from the board. And the member for Guysborough Port Hawkesbury can stand and say what he has done for the Strait Regional School Board in light of the fact Another 16 teachers are on their way out of the classroom again this year. Mr. Speaker, it has been quoted today the numbers that have come from provincial testing for students in Nova Scotia. Mr. Speaker, I think it is safe to say that we are all collectively concerned about the marks that are being received by our Nova Scotia students when it comes to provincial testing and national standards. Mr. Speaker, we have prided ourselves over the years on providing a top quality education system, of having some of the best and brightest graduates come out of our schools from one end of this province to the next. And to start seeing marks of 33% in math, in the 40% range for chemistry, that is just not good enough. And for a government to sit back and say, look, don't worry, be happy, that is just not good enough, Mr. Speaker, when a government said that they would do more for education. The spectacle that we have seen from this government when it's come to student relief programs is unprecedented. First, a government that said that they would be there for post-secondary students, to turn around, cancel the loan remission program, and to wait 3 long years before coming in with a watered-down version of the program, and then to say it only applies to students starting university in September 2003. Mr. Speaker, I have heard from parents in my riding that have students going to university. They've had some of their children who've benefited from the loan remission program, and then they have some of their other children who've been stuck in the Tory program of denying loan remission. And Mr. Speaker, the figures are alarming as to how much additional debt those children are having to absorb as a result of this Tory government. Mr. Speaker, students and parents will not forget what this government has done to the debts that students will be left with in this province. I've already spoken in my place, Mr. Speaker, given examples of a young couple from Richmond County. 2 students, 2 graduates from St. FX, 2 education graduates who are now left with a monthly student loan payment, their combined loans, of $1,200 a month. Mr. Speaker, that is atrocious. It is absolutely atrocious. How can we possibly expect these young people coming out of university who wish to remain in Nova Scotia to be contributing to our economy when $1,200 is going to the banks out of their monthly incomes? $1,200 that could be reinvested in our communities is gone. Is this a short-term measure? You can be guaranteed that they've got at least 10 years of this to look forward to, Mr. Speaker. How can we possibly grow our economy if these individuals are burdened with these types of debts? What has been the answer on the Minister of Finance? Let's continue to increase user fees. Let's put an extra 2 cents on gas. Hey, what's 2 cents? No, really, what's 2 cents? Nova Scotians won't be bothered by that. 2 cents. Mr. Speaker, I have to tell you, I was alarmed to find out that that 2 cents a litre brought in $25 million of additional revenue to this province. Who paid for that $25 million, Mr. Speaker? It's average Nova Scotians. It's seniors, it's the working class, it's those on disability, it's the youth of this province. They have paid into that $25 million. Yet, with the check that is coming in the mail, there's a hell of a lot of them that won't be seeing that check of $155 because of the policies of this government. Oh, yes, I am. Oh, no, I've used it many times. I'll use it many times again. Mr. Speaker, let me tell you, when you come to look at the $155, we have lifted the veil on this. At first, the government spinned out that this was a policy that they want to put money into the hands of Nova Scotians. What we've now found out from the Minister of Finance is that it is Cabinet, not members, not employees of the Department of Finance, senior civil servants who have many years of working towards protecting the finances of this province and providing sound financial advice. Did they go outside and bring in accounting firms or different establishments to say, what is the best value for our dollar on this? None of that, Mr. Speaker. Cabinet. The Minister of Finance from the Buchanan era, the House Leader from the Buchanan era, the Minister of Education from a long ago era, sat there and said, how can we get the best political bang for our buck? How about we send out a check? Then, Mr. Speaker, the political spin doctors tried to spin that, well, we had no choice with the check. You know, Revenue Canada, we're not really sure about how that works. They need some time and everything. What we've been able to establish, Mr. Speaker, is that clearly they had the option of doing a 10% reduction on July 1st. They made the decision not to give that reduction and to instead send out the check to Nova Scotians. Now, Mr. Speaker, I certainly do not claim to be a financial analyst. I come from a legal background. But we have already had representations made to us that the results of this check coming out all at once into the economy, $68 million being injected all at once, will actually have the effect of raising inflation in this province. Now, the Minister of Finance doesn't like to talk about that, doesn't even like to acknowledge that. In fact, they have gone further to explain that in the end, by injecting $68 million in one shot into the economy, will, over the long run, have a negative effect over the economy of the province, and in fact, will play a very detrimental effect on the 10% tax cut coming in January. Now again, I would say to you, Mr. Speaker, more to come. There are people much more learned in the financial field that will be able to explain that much better than I ever could, and I certainly don't purport to try to do that. But again, I submit to you, more to come on the $155 check. And you look at the reaction. Over the weekend, I was in Richmond County, and a few people stopped me and they said, how much is it costing for that $155 check? And I said, well, the Minister of Finance tells us $68 million. You know what the answer is, Mr. Speaker? How many roads could we pave in Richmond with $68 million? How many more nurses could we pay for with $68 million? How many more doctors could we have with $68 million? How many more beds could we have with $68 million? How many more teachers could we put in the Strait Regional School Board with $68 million? That is what they're saying. That's what they're saying, Mr. Speaker. They're not saying that they're looking forward to this $155, because at the end of the day, we all know that this is the government that, as a result of their user fees, Mr. Speaker, they've got you from birth to death, is what this government has done. Because they've increased fees from your birth certificate right to your death certificate and everything in between. That is the Tory legacy. That is the legacy the Minister of Finance will leave. That he's nailed you from death right till your death. From your birth right till your death. That is what this government has done. Yet, with all of that additional revenue, they present a budget saying, we want to add another $118 million onto the debt. On top of that, Mr. Speaker, what we have been able to reveal is that within a matter of years, the debt servicing cost to this province will reach $1 billion per year. How many government departments could that pay for? $1 billion. If I'm not mistaken, I believe $1 billion is more than what the Department of Education has. I believe $1 billion is much more than the Department of Transportation has. $1 billion is probably more than what the Department of Community Services has. Or it's very close. Very close.
Order. I wonder if the member from Richmond would entertain an introduction. The Honourable Minister of Agriculture and Fisheries.
I'd like to thank the member opposite for allowing me to make the introduction. Call the members' attention to the gallery opposite. We have some visitors. Mom and Dad of one of the pages here. Mr. and Mrs. Cox are up visiting with their son, I think, and spending the evening watching proceedings. So I'd ask everyone to give them a warm welcome.
Thank you and welcome to all our guests in the gallery. I recognize the member from Richmond who has 27 and a half minutes left.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I certainly want to welcome the Cox family to this house. Also, I know that their son has been doing a terrific job for us here in this house for a number of years now, and we're certainly pleased to have him with us again for this session. And they can certainly be proud of how he's handled himself in a very distinguished way over the years in serving the members of this House. So I welcome them here. And I'm sure the caucus, like everyone else in this province, is very concerned about what Bill 36 is going to do to Nova Scotians and what message it sends out to all of Nova Scotians. Mr. Speaker, as I said, 6 months would give this government an opportunity to maybe answer a few of the questions about their Blue Book. We've had the opportunity to review their Blue Book. They were quite fond of it in 1999, and they appeared now to be wishing to forget a lot of sections of that Blue Book. When you look under, for example, on post-secondary education, as I said before, there's a section there that would provide for income tax relief for graduating students who had student loans to help them defer the cost of their loan payments. When I asked the Minister of Education during estimates, where is the status of that program, he said, well, I talked to the Minister of Finance and he told me, drop it, bad idea, we're not doing it. So how was it for that promise? I said, well, maybe it just happens, that's one promise. Let's check on a few others. There was another promise there that said that they would put in a plan to provide university employment for students attending university while they're at university. And yet, when I asked the minister, well, what's the status of that program? He said, we haven't done anything on that yet either. So I said, okay, so that's two promises broken. Maybe that's just fluky. Let's try another one. There was another commitment in there to provide a job search program for graduating students to try to match them with appropriate employment. And I asked the minister, could you tell us what the status of that program is? Again, we haven't done anything on that. So on one page of the Blue Book, 3 broken promises. Now, Speaker, another thing the 6-month hoist would do, and I'm sure that the Minister of Service Nova Scotia Municipal Affairs will be very curious and very interested in this, is the 6 months might give him an opportunity to explain to the people of Richmond County how they came about the assessment for Nova Scotia Power. Now, Speaker, as many members would know, and I'm sure the Mayor from Guysborough Port House would be aware, and the Minister of Tourism, Richmond County and Point Tupper is the home to the Point Tupper generating station for Nova Scotia Power. Now, this government underwent a review to try to determine how the assessment for Nova Scotia Power would be determined. Lo and behold, Mr. Speaker, even though Richmond County is the home to the Nova Scotia Power generating station in Point Tupper, Richmond County is the only municipal unit that under the Tory plan actually lost money under the new assessment procedures, under the new sharing of Nova Scotia Power's taxes. Now, Mr. Speaker, needless to say, the people of Richmond County are very upset at the thought that here they have a generating station and their assessment has gone down, whereas other municipal units it has gone up, who don't have as significant an investment from Nova Scotia Power as what Richmond has. But how ironic, Mr. Speaker, who is the one who was in the local paper saying how unfair this Tory government has been? None other than Councillor Richard Cotton, who has said, how can this Tory government do a plan for Nova Scotia Power's tax revenues that pretty much puts the screws to Richmond County? Because we are the only one who actually lost money under this Tory plan. So not only, Mr. Speaker, can they content the people of Richmond County or content Nova Scotians, they can't even content their own candidates running for their party who are saying that this government is misdirected, that this government has not put together a plan that addresses the needs of Richmond County or other areas. And again, on the issue of assessment, not on the pipeline, but on the Sable offshore plants and infrastructure. 4 years this government has had to come up with a plan and to come up with a settlement with the Sable partners. And again, here we are, 4 years later, still nothing settled. They've settled on the pipeline, but as far as a fractionation plant, as far as the onshore plant in Goldboro, nothing settled yet. 4 years later. And the member from Guysborough Port Hawkesbury is quite content to sit there quiet and not say a word. I can't recall once hearing him in 4 years raising to talk about the impact this would have on his municipal unit in Guysborough, the potential benefit it would have, or to even call upon his government to take action. He's remained silent, and I can assure you that the good people in the new riding of Guysborough Sheet Harbour will not forget that in the upcoming election, I assure you, Mr. Speaker. Now, 6 months would also give the Minister of Finance the opportunity to come back to the Strait area, because he was there last week and he told the Strait Area Chamber of Commerce that in his view, the Strait Area was going to be the new industrial heartland of Nova Scotia. Well, what a profound statement that the Minister of Finance would say. Imagine, what a pleasant surprise for the people in the Strait 4 years under this government that they now come in and say, we think you're going to be the next industrial heartland of Nova Scotia. So let's look at what they've done in Nova Scotia Business Incorporated. How many people have they put to the Strait Area to develop the Strait Area's economy? 1. So, okay, well, how about the Department of Economic Development? How many employees have they dedicated to the Strait Area to develop the economy? 1. How many people have they put from the Department of Energy into the Strait Area to help develop the economy, help develop Goldboro, help develop the fractionation plant, help develop a liquid natural gas industry? None. Yet the Minister of Finance comes in, and I think you're going to be the next industrial heartland of Nova Scotia. What a mockery. What a mockery that has been provided, Mr. Speaker, when you see what this government has done in the last 4 years.
Order. The Honourable Minister of Finance on a point of order.
Mr. Speaker, on a point of order, the member opposite is displaying why the Liberal Party has no confidence in the economy. Mr. Speaker, I did go to Port Hawkesbury area, and I did say that my envisionment for the Strait Area is that it will become the industrial heartland of Nova Scotia. And Mr. Speaker, when the member opposite is probably replaced by Richie Cotton, hopefully we'll have somebody there which will basically...
Order. Yeah. That's not a point of order. Order. All right. Order. I understand that members may have at times the desire to have disputes between members and call them point of orders, but I would hope that we wouldn't start also suggesting what will be happening in the next election as we go through these point of orders. I recognize the member from Richmond.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I have no doubt that prior to the 1993 election, the member from Argyll was probably making those same assertions about his re-election chances in 1993, so you might want to be careful. I'm sure you'd be familiar with a good Acadian saying, crache à l'air, tombe sur le nez. If he's not familiar with it, I can explain it to him a little bit later, but it's a very simple statement, Mr. Speaker, that pretty much explains what advice that the Minister of Finance might want to adhere to when it comes to that subject. But again, Mr. Speaker, you know, what a hollow statement to come in 4 years after the fact and say, I think you're going to be the next industrial heartland. Mr. Speaker, we have been fighting for that for years. We've been fighting to try to get government to put the necessary resources in the Strait Area to help the economy develop. Yeah, Mr. Speaker, we've seen the ministers of energy here, the previous one, the current one, say there's not enough liquid natural gas coming into Nova Scotia to justify a petrochemical industry. We have heard that time and time again. Not enough. The member from Gosford Port Hawkesbury, he agreed with that. The minister from Inverness, he agreed with that. The minister from Antigonish, no, we can't have a petrochemical industry in the Strait. Not enough gas, that's what their government is telling us. Yet we read in the Herald last week that the Irving Empire plans on building a liquid natural gas facility in St. John, New Brunswick, to use Nova Scotians' liquid natural gas to develop a petrochemical industry, with construction to start in the near future. Yet this government tells the people in the Strait, no, you don't have enough gas, there's just not enough coming ashore. Yet the Irvings can start building a plant to use Nova Scotia's gas to create their own petrochemical industry. That's the legacy after 4 years this government has had. And if you want to see, and I did challenge the members from the Strait area, the Tory members, if they want to see what this government's legacy is for the development of our offshore gas, then they should stand at the causeway and watch the train going along the causeway with all those bullet cars with the liquid natural gas leaving Nova Scotia. It's now going to the U.S., but under the Irving plan, it'll go to New Brunswick. Yet this government continues to tell the people in the Strait, you should be the next industrial heartland, but no, we can't do petrochemical industry. We can't help you put a new pier in the Strait area. We can't help you get the necessary cranes and that to develop a new port in the Strait area. Look, we just can't do that. We're going to provide one employee from the NSBI, one employee from economic development, and from energy, none. Mr. Speaker, it is a sad day. And that's what the people of the Strait area, like people throughout all of Nova Scotia, are saying. Wasted opportunities. Wasted opportunities. When this government came into office, we had a vibrant offshore. We had lots of excitement. We had lots of potential. And yet what do we see today? The Minister of Energy, almost on a week-by-week basis, saying, shucks, this company's going home. Shucks, this other company's going home. Shucks, here goes another one that's not going to drill their wells. That is what they've been relegated to. They've been relegated to accepting defeat. But then again, we know where defeats are. When it came to the offshore dispute with Newfoundland, the Premier stepped in and said, I'm going to defend the interests of Nova Scotia. I'm going to testify. I'm going to make sure to tell them that Nova Scotia is the best case, and we're going to win. History shows what happened in that case. Not only did we lose, we lost big time. In fact, I remember when the decision came out, my good colleague from Glaze Bay was afraid that Newfoundland's boundary line had actually taken up the riding of Glaze Bay. That's how much they came off the coast of Cape Breton in that boundary decision. He feared his riding was going to be lost. That is what the legacy is when it comes for this government standing up for Nova Scotians in light of other provinces. They watched by as Bernard Lord in New Brunswick said he was going to have a New Brunswick first gas policy, that he would make sure that Nova Scotia gas met the needs of the people in New Brunswick, or there would be no Nova Scotia gas. And they sat by. And they said, oh my God, what do we do? This Bernard Lord, he's way ahead of us. And they sat back. Where was the Premier then to defend our interests? Where was he there to put up a fight for us? Just didn't happen. As I said, 6 months would give this government an opportunity. We have a Minister of Finance who has already admitted that by allowing bracket creep, he increased taxes in this province. We have a Minister of Finance who has said that if he allows bracket creep to continue, his 10% tax cut effective January 1st will in very little time disappear. And when they asked him, will you commit today to ending bracket creep so that your 10% tax cut is a real tax cut? He said, no, I'm not prepared to commit to that. The veil's being lifted, Mr. Speaker. Nova Scotians are truly seeing what is happening with this government. How these are hollow promises. The 10% tax cut, the check they've sent out, is nothing but a mere attempt of smoke and mirrors to confuse Nova Scotian voters about issues such as Bill 68. They brought nurses here to Province House rather than being in our hospitals. They brought our paramedics. We all remember the ambulance parked here in our parking lot with its sirens on. Rather than addressing emergencies of our loved ones throughout the province, we're here picketing at Province House because of this government. And where we now see people who worked with some of the most special people here in this province, the Residential Services Society workers, that this government has also brought these people to the picket lines. It's an absolute disgrace, to say the least, Mr. Speaker, because for a Premier who said, I will respect Nova Scotian voters, I understand what the priorities of Nova Scotian voters, he has spent 4 years doing the exact opposite of what was the priority of Nova Scotians. And history will judge he and his government on that. Mr. Speaker, this is a government on another issue. You know, there's been a lot of talk about nursing home fees. It is an important issue for those who are forced to go to nursing homes. But one of the issues forgotten there, Mr. Speaker, is the issues that surround our seniors who do not go to nursing homes but stay in their own homes. Where has the government been on the issues of the in-home support program, which provided funding for loved ones to take care of their elderly parents at home? Where has been the discussion on housing programs that would allow seniors to build washrooms on the main floor so that they didn't have to climb up the stairs, to fix their leaky roofs, to fix their bad wiring? Where has been the discussion on increased home care services? Not only the current level that we have now, but addressing some of the particular needs. of Nova Scotians? Where has been the discussions on including the Alzheimer's drugs on the provincial formulary so that our loved ones who suffer from Alzheimer's can maintain a quality of life longer than to be having to suffer the affliction that Alzheimer brings? Where has that discussion gone, Mr. Speaker? Because I can tell you in Richmond County, there are many individuals who rely on nursing homes, but there's a lot more that stay in their homes that face these issues every day. And yet, where has the discussion been on their behalf? Because they not only do they stay at home, they pay the high cost of home heating fuel, they pay the high cost of insurance. If they have the privilege of owning a vehicle, they pay the high cost of insuring that vehicle, the high cost of gas. They've worked all their lives. They've provided for their children. They've grown this economy. And yet what does this government say? When it comes to giving some of that money back, it says to them, you're not good enough. You are not worthy. You are not deserving of receiving any of that money back. And that is the message that I will certainly be bringing to the people of Richmond County, to the seniors, to those who are on disability for whatever reason that they can no longer work, for the single parents who are trying to work to provide for their children, who do not pay provincial income tax, yet are faced with the user fees, yet are faced with the increased taxes, yet when it comes to getting some of that money back, the government says, you're not good enough. Well, I say, Mr. Speaker, on my part and on behalf of our caucus, that this government's actions in this regard is not good enough. And this is not what Nova Scotians expect from a government. They expect better. And from a premier who said on the first page of his Blue Book, I will respect voters. I will respect their intelligence and I will reflect their priorities. Again, this is an administration that has done everything but that. That is the facts of the matter, Mr. Speaker. That is why we want to see an additional 6 months to bring that message to Nova Scotians. Because I want to tell you, I know this government wants to get to the election before the checks start getting in the mail. Why? Because they are afraid that the many Nova Scotians right now who think they are receiving this check, they want to go to the polls before they find out without a doubt that they're not getting this check. And I can tell you, Mr. Speaker, I've been encouraging seniors and people on disability in my riding and telling them, call my office and we will find out if you're eligible to receive this payment. And more are calling and more are finding out that they do not qualify for it. And the anger is very apparent as a result of that, Mr. Speaker, which is why this government wants to make sure that they do make it to the polls before those people find out that they will not get any money back, regardless of how much they have been paying for the revenues that this government is enjoying. Mr. Speaker, the 6 months will provide them with the opportunity. The Minister of Finance says that the decision to send out checks of $155 had absolutely nothing to do with the upcoming election. He says it just happens by chance. We're sending out checks with an election coming. But there's no correlation between the two. Now, Mr. Speaker, we all know there's not one Nova Scotian other than a die-hard Tory that believes that. They all know that the check, when they could have implemented a 10% tax reduction effective July 1st, they made the decision to send out checks in the middle of an election campaign. For the Minister of Finance to now say, no, look, that's not really the case. We just decided to send out checks to grow the economy. Yet financial analysts tell us it will not have that effect. There are numerous negative effects that this decision could have. That is the reality that we face here, Mr. Speaker, and that is why we as an opposition want to give Nova Scotians an opportunity. When they have entrusted a government with over $5 billion of Nova Scotians' money annually and said, we are entrusting with you to invest this in our priorities and to spend it in a fiscally prudent way and not to have to borrow money or mortgage our grandchildren's future, Mr. Speaker, clearly Nova Scotians are saying they've given this government an opportunity. They've given them 4 years. They've had 4 years of a strong economy, 4 years of an extra $1 billion in revenue, and after 4 years, we have had failure in addressing the most pressing needs of Nova Scotians, and that is why it is my hope that we will have an opportunity to further debate Bill number 36, to further debate the negative aspects of this and how the government has failed to get a hold of the pulse of Nova Scotians, and I look forward to continuing discussions on that. And Mr. Speaker, with that, I would now like to move adjournment of the debate on Bill 36.
Order. Order. Okay. There's a motion to adjourn debate. I hear two members ask for a recorded vote. I will say that if the House unanimously agrees, we can just adjourn the House now. Is that, or do we want to ring the bells for an hour, or until all the members are available? Well, okay, we can have the question, but it's recorded vote, so that means, okay, recorded vote. There will be a recorded vote, and we'll ring the bells. Okay. Order. Order. Are the whips satisfied? Okay. Okay, there's a request for recorded vote, so I think officially we have to at least have unanimous consent to waive recorded vote and go with a verbal vote. Is that agreed? Agreed. Okay. All those in favor of adjourning debate on the Financial Measures Act amendment, hoist amendment, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. I recognize the Government House Leader to announce the hours of debate.
Mr. Speaker, I move the House to now rise to meet again on the morrow at the hour of 12 noon, and the House will sit until 8 p.m. The order of business following question period will be a resumption of the debate on the Financial Measures Act, Bill 36.
Thank you. And is there a motion to adjourn the House? Oh, thank you. Yeah. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carried. House is adjourned until tomorrow at noon.